Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on World Obesity Day. I think this image here is quite a juxtaposition to the beautiful images that were presented before by Deanne. But yeah, I'm going to be speaking about the socioeconomic drivers of obesity, and it's aligned with the research that I do at Curtin University, based in Perth, Western Australia. So yeah, next slide, please. So starting off with the economic drivers, so there's substantial research that shows that economic hardship is one of the strongest predictors of obesity. So people living with economic hardship, sort of in more of those lower socioeconomic environments, they often live in what we call sort of an obesogenic environment. So this means that they frequently have less access to spaces or environments where they can participate in physical activity. So whether that is parks or recreational facilities, when it comes to say, I guess, even if they, really want to participate in physical activity or different sporting activities, they're just living in an environment that limits that ability to do so. There's also greater access to calorie dense, nutrient poor food, which is just a complicated way of saying junk food. And then there's often less access to high quality healthcare services as well for people that are living with, economic hardship. And importantly, I think it's really important to emphasize the final point here is that while there is often less access to, physical activity, say healthier food, and higher quality healthcare services, there's often more urgent priorities for a lot of people living with economic hardship, whether it's, their long work hours, raising their family, needing to pay their bills, that may actually come before some of these other lifestyle, say, decisions or options they may even be able to think about. So that sort of broader underlying economic hardship can really have an impact on their ability to even consider, lifestyle, options that they may be able to, choose to help, address obesity. Next slide, please. Then when it comes to the social drivers as well, often they, begin in childhood and they can actually compound across the life course. So the research that I've been doing at Curtin has shown that, child maltreatment in the form of child neglect or child abuse is directly predictive of the development of obesity later in life. We also know that, a dysfunctional sort of family home can, really increase the risk of the development of obesity. And then during adolescence, obviously that's a very sensitive time for, changes in body image and how young adults and adolescents start to feel about the way that they look. And that can often be accompanied by a lot of bullying for those people that do, maybe start to gain a bit of weight. That can then also be compounded by chronic stress during that time. And the really important point here as well is the development of weight stigma and weight bias in the broader community and even in the context of healthcare can really have a negative impact. And it becomes this sort of really pervasive effect on a person's life. If they've started to gain some weight and they start to experience weight stigma, then that can actually sort of develop this sort of negative feedback where the stigma actually feels into worse feelings about themselves, and then that can actually then perpetuate, say, further, maladaptive behaviors around possibly, turning to food to cope, which then can lead to greater weight gain and then often even more stigma as well. So the weight bias and stigma in our communities is really a barrier for many, many people, even if they, are very much, eager to possibly, start thinking about lifestyle changes. Just the next slide too, please. So what happens when we combine the economic and the social drivers, in combination? And this, obviously I won't go through this model in a lot of depth now, but this model here by my colleague Eric Hemmingson, published in 2023, I think is a really good sort of life course model, really focusing on more of the social and the economic and psychological factors that can underlie a lot of people's experiences during life, which often can lead to the development of obesity, but are often ignored or completely unaddressed. So you can imagine here, if we start at part A, where someone may have experienced some sort of family and social adversity at the beginning of their life. And then if that then leads on to, different types of insecurity, whether it's abuse or neglect in the home, if that's then compounded through different forms of chronic stress and anxiety, this is then as we move through part B and then into part C of the model, it's where people may start to, turn to possibly food or different ways of coping with all of that underlying social adversity and stress. which then can lead to, say, the development of overweight and maybe obesity and even higher levels of obesity. And then it's at the bottom of that model there in part C, often sort of during adolescence and early adulthood, where the weight stigma, the judgment, and all of the internalized stigma about themselves because they have gained weight can really then develop this negative feedback loop where the stigma feeds into negative perceptions of themselves, greater weight gain, greater stigma, and so on. So I think it's really, really important, particularly on World Obesity Day, that we really start to pay attention to some of these underlying social and economic factors that are really strong predictors of the development of obesity in our societies. Thank you.